Starting out tonight a little different. I'm excited to start the initial reading of a two-part cooperative collaboration with Helen of the Serpent Tarot, whose influence propelled me into beginning this channel in the first place. She has really great readings. Many are related to the Kabbalah and all kinds of esotericism. So a little bit of East meets West, with the I-ming being something that is something I've truly fell in love with as a divination practice coming from ancient China. This is more out in space. It's the energies that are around us, kind of very spiritual and alchemically focused. So we'll start the reading with figuring out kind of the general things, and then Helen will take it off from there with a little bit of the ground floor and what that means for us in our day-to-day and practical situations, that sort of thing. So we'll see what the question might be based on this reading, and I'll put a link in the description box to head over to Helen of the Serpent Tarot, and I think you'll be very happy if you haven't already seen any of her videos. So we will kick it off. This will be a shortened version of what I normally do. I've left bookmarks or timestamps rather in the video, and I've done that with several of the newer videos. So please take a look at those. And if you're intimidated by the amount of time that are allotted to each of those videos, just know that you can skip around within them if you feel you only want to read the I-ming and skip the coin toss, for instance, or if you're more attracted to the readings from various things like Immortal Sisters or the Book of Harmony and Balance, for instance, some of the Taoist books that are alchemical in nature often, or poetry, that kind of thing, Taoist poetry, then you can usually find that right at the beginning. So we're going to dive right in and keep this short and simple for the collaboration. And I'm excited that not only when I reached out to Helen saying that she had very much influenced me in starting my own channel, that she not only was excited about my channel starting, but that she wanted to do a collaboration. So thank you very much, and we will get started. Three Tails, Old Yin. Two heads, one tail. Yang yang. Oh, no, sorry, yang yin. Three heads, old yang. Two tails, one head, yang yang. One head, two tails. Yang yang. Two heads, one tail, yang yin. Our primary hexagram will have a bottom trigram that we will read as broken, broken, solid to start out with. Our first and third lines are old, this being in old yin, and our third line being in old yang. They will transform to give us a secondary hexagram to their young opposites. So old yin will transform to young yang. Old yang will transform to young yin. But to begin with, we'll read them as their old versions. So broken, broken, solid. This gives us a bottom or inner trigram of Gen, mountain. The mountain is still. It is a limit where you must stop. Gen brings each cycle to an end, defining a space where we can recognize, assimilate, and complete our experience. He creates a personal still center amid change where we can retreat for perspective and a firm foundation for new growth. He is well-grounded, confident, and of independent spirit. He is still and knows. Mountain is the youngest son, child of maturity. In the cycle of directions and seasons, he is the northeast, late winter approaching spring, the pivot between cycles. Our top or outer trigram of our primary hexagram and of our secondary hexagram, since there's no changing lines, will be read as solid, solid, broken. This is the trigram. Dewy, lake or marsh. Dewy is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. So dewy, lake or marsh above Gen, mountain, will give us a primary hexagram of 31. And once our changing lines change, our bottom or inner trigram will transform into solid, broken, broken. This, I believe, is Zen thunder. Thunder is shock, upheaval, and the spark of the new. In old Chinese belief, thunder slept in the earth over winter and erupted from it in spring, awakening living things into new growth. Thunder is our basic drive for renewal. He inspires initiative and decisive action. He is the stimulus that sets things in motion. He is the eldest son in the trigram family, the first connection of heaven, potential, with earth, realization. Yang makes itself known here, emerging into the field and beginning to grow. Thunder belongs to the east and to spring. Zen thunder above it's actually dewy lake or marsh above Zen thunder. Will give us a supporting hexagram of 17. And we will start out by reading the text section from I-ming's The Taoist I-ching. He wrote this in 1796 as a Taoist adept, and Thomas Cleary's translated it. In the beginning, it gives us really short definitions of each hexagram, so we'll start there. 31 is, as our primary hexagram, is sensitivity, harmonization of the celestial and the earthly. And 17 is following, according with conditions, going along with human desire to gradually introduce guidance. And how our lines interact with one another, our hexagrams interact with one another. Basically, how the question we bring to the I-ching when we consult the oracle, which has the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time, we will understand the answer to that when we understand how the parts of our reading work together. The key to understanding a reading is to know your way around its main components, how they fit together, and the different roles they play. If your reading includes changing lines, then you will need to understand primary hexagram, relating hexagram, and changing lines together. The two hexagrams in conversation with one another map out your whole answer. The primary hexagram shows you quite directly what your answer involves. The relating hexagram generally describes what the answer is about for you. It sets the primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. If the two hexagrams map out a landscape for you, then the changing lines stick a pin in that map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They are the immediate answer to your question. As the most specific focused part of a reading, their message always takes precedence over all other elements. For example, the primary hexagram might describe a reassuringly secure situation, but a changing line could warn how insecure your position is within it. This is from Hilary Barrett's I-ming, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. And we will read from her in a little bit here. So starting our reading in the text section, 31, our primary hexagram, sensitivity. Sensitivity is developmental. It is beneficial to be correct. Marriage brings good fortune. Explanation. Sensitivity means feeling and influence. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is lake, joyous, and below is mountain, still. Firmness rests within, flexibility rests without. Stillness is the substance of joyfulness. Joyfulness is the function of stillness. This hexagram has the meaning of yin and yang responding to each other, so it is called sensitivity. This hexagram represents harmonization of yin and yang. It follows on the previous hexagram, pitfalls. In pitfalls, yin traps yang. Yang is not strong and yin is not docile. Yin and yang do not combine, so this work of harmonization is indispensable. But harmonization of yin and yang calls for spontaneity, not force. Spontaneity is non-conscious sensitivity, while force is conscious sensitivity. With non-conscious sensitivity, yin and yang harmonize with each other without any insensitivity. With conscious sensitivity, yin and yang are individually separate and sensitivity has limits. Therefore, in sensitivity, there is a path of development. But though the path of sensitivity is developmental, there is right and wrong non-consciousness, and there is right and wrong consciousness. You cannot say that the non-consciousness of a dead tree or cold ashes is developmental path of sensitivity. Dead trees and cold ashes are purely negative with no positivity. How could that be called sensitivity? Sensitivity means the subtle communion of yin and yang, as in the image of the hexagram, wherein a boy and a girl are together, each unminding, till the yin and yang energies are full, and their feelings stir, and they naturally become sensitive to each other. This is unaffected sensitivity. How can you take ignorant mindlessness to be sensitivity? Non-consciousness or mindlessness, in the proper sense of the term, means there is no human mentality. When there is no human mentality, there is the mind of Tao. The mind of Tao is a mind that is not minding. Minding means having the human mentality. When one has the human mentality, one lacks the mind of Tao. The mind of the human mentality is not the real mind. The mind of Tao is real. The human mentality is artificial. When you use the artificial mind, sensing is inaccurate. Yin and yang dichotomize. When you use the real mind, sensing is true. yin and yang commune. Whether yin senses and yang responds, or yang senses and yin responds, they are equally ruled by the mind of Tao and sense correctly. When sensitivity is true, not sensing by mentality, what is there that cannot be sensed? What sensing is not potentially beneficial? In terms of correct sensitivity, no one in the world compares to a chaste woman. The virtues of a woman are based on chastity and calm, not easily losing herself to others. She will wait for a good partner to have feeling. This is feeling not by the heart, but by truth. In the qualities of the hexagram, first there is stillness. After that, joy. Joy comes from stillness. When practitioners of the Tao harmonize yin and yang, causing yin and yang to communicate sensitively, if they can take the virtue of a chaste woman as their sensitivity, then whatever they sense will be right. Tranquil and imperturbable, yet sensitive and effective. Sensitive and effective, yet tranquil and imperturbable. They rest in the proper place, whether they go along with things or reverse them. All is as they will, and they attain that good fortune. And now to read our supporting hexagram 17 following, which sets our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel. It shows what our primary hexagram means for us. Following. Following is greatly developmental. It is beneficial if correct. Then there is no fault. Explanation. Following means going along. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is lake, joyous, and below is thunder, active. It means self and others in accord, others rejoicing when one acts, acting to the delight of others. Therefore it is called following. This hexagram represents seeking feeling through essence. It follows on the previous hexagram of humility. Humble people make naught of what they have and reveal what they lack. Thereby they use yin to make yang complete. However, this is after the return of yang. Before yang has returned, true yang will not come unless there is a way to summon and absorb it. The way to summon and absorb it is the path of following. In this hexagram, thunder and lake join. Thunder associated with the east represents the essence, the self. Lake associated with the west represents feeling, the other. In the beginning of life, essence and feeling are one. The primordial true yang is originally in oneself, but when it mixes with acquired conditioning, it is lost outside, so no longer one's own, but belongs to other. If you want to get back to the origin and return to the fundamental, you have to steal it back from the other. Following as a path is going along with what is desired, gradually introducing guidance. Going along with desire means the self follows the other and gets the other's favor, inducing the other to come follow the self. Other and self following each other, essence seeks feeling. Feeling returns to essence, and that which had been lost is restored to oneself. This is great development by way of the path of following. However, though the path of following can be greatly developmental, yet there are true and false medicinal substances. There is progression and order in the firing process. There are times for action and stillness. There are times for advance and withdrawal. A small slip produces a tremendous miss. Therefore, the great development of the path of following, correctness is most beneficial. Correct means right, following rightly, the self sensing rightly, the other responding rightly. When self and other are both right, even artificial feeling transforms into true feeling, and even artificial essence changes into true essence. Essence loves receptivity and rectitude in feeling. Feeling loves compassion and benevolence in essence. Strength and flexibility, one energy. Essence and feeling joined, we return to pristine purity. Wholly integrated with natural principle, the golden elixir crystallizes. Tranquil and unperturbed, yet sensitive and effective yet tranquil and undisturbed. Those who are faulty are at the outset wind up impeccable in the end. Try to understand when following is right or wrong, good or bad. We will now go back to our primary hexagram 31 to read changing lines 1 and 3, which will put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. It's the most specific part of our reading and takes precedence over all other elements. Changing line 1 has the general context of inklings just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. And line 3, an emerging identity facing a transition with fear or desire, resolution or indecision. Changing line 1 of hexagram 31, our primary hexagram sensitivity. Sensing in the big toe is inauspicious. Explanation. When one is foolish and low-minded, unable to refine the self and discipline the mind, to arbitrarily imagine great things is like sensing in the big toe. The big toe can move but not walk. To feel something one cannot carry out is not right sensing. Thus is sensitivity that stirs the human mentality. And changing line 3. Sensing in the thighs, when persistence turns to indulgence, to go on is shameful. Explanation. Positive firmness should keep the mind of Tao and not be moved by external things. In the human mentality, positivity is not balanced. Seeing scenes, it gives rise to feelings. This is likened to sensing in the thighs. Sensing in the thighs, one cannot stop in the proper place, giving rise to confusion according to influences. Persistence in keeping the mind of Tao is not single-minded, and where there was the mind of Tao, one again gives rise to the human mentality. To go on to practice the Tao in this way would inevitably bring one humiliation before the wise. This is sensitivity losing the mind of Tao. Normally we would go on to the commentary section, but we are going to get a little snippet also from James Dekorne, who synthesizes several commentaries and gives his own editor's notes, which are often very profound and helpful. I've given links to his site for each of our hexagrams in the description box below as well. He calls hexagram 31 our primary hexagram initiative or influence. Other titles might be wooing, attraction, sensation, stimulation, conjoining, feelings, sensitivity, sensing, affection, influencing to action, tension, seeking union, persuasion, courting response, importuning. In the judgment, we have a quote from Ritzema/Karcher, conjoining, growing, harvesting trial, grasping womanhood significant. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of the influence that separated parts of an intrinsic whole have on each other. It emphasizes that bringing these parts into contact is the adequate way to handle the situation. In the image, we have a quote from Legge, the image of a marsh over a mountain forms initiative. The superior man frees his mind of preoccupation so that he is open to the influence of others. Literally, thus the superior man receives people by virtue of emptiness. Commentary, Confucius/Legge, initiative is here used in the sense of mutually influencing. The magnetic trigram is above and the dynamic trigram is below. Their two influences move, respond, and unite with each other. The male is placed below the female. His repression is her satisfaction and brings fulfillment. Advantage depends upon firm correctness, as in the marrying of a young lady. Heaven and earth stimulate each other, and all things attain birth. The sages stimulate the minds of men, and harmony is born. If we examine the pattern of these influences, the nature of heaven and earth is revealed. Leg. The lines of the hexagram all deal with moving or influencing to movement, and the figure is an essay on the different ways of creating an influence, and the results engendered thereby. The lower trigram of the youngest son supports the upper trigram of the youngest daughter in happy union. This is correct because the lower trigram, here yang, should always take the initiative. No influence is so powerful and constant as that between husband and wife, and where they are both young, it is especially active. Therefore, mutual influence, correct in itself, and for correct ends, is sure to be effective. Then notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Initiative succeeds only when it originates from the self. The superior man clears his mind and remains receptive to the will of the self. Wilhelm's translation of the name of this hexagram is influence, but I have chosen initiative to emphasize the idea of the proper source of the influence implied in the symbolism. Webster's Third New International Dictionary defines initiative as follows. Initiative 1. An introductory step or movement, an act designed to originate or set on foot as a process or train of events, often used in the phrase, on one's own initiative, as in, don't blame me, he acted on his own initiative. The judgment states that the situation can be furthered only by the firm correctness associated with the proper contracting of a marriage. We already know that the symbolism of marriage refers to a union of opposites within the psyche. To understand what is meant by the proper contracting of a marriage, we need only look at hexagram number 54, propriety, or the marrying maiden, to see the improper way to do it. That is when the woman takes the initiative. Far from being a sexist idea, the symbolism reveals a profound archetypal truth. The polarity of forces in the psyche shows the ego as magnetic to the dynamic self. That is, the conscious ego complex in any psyche, male or female, is feminine or magnetic in relation to the self, which is masculine or dynamic. In the I-ming, the self is symbolized by heaven and the ego is symbolized by earth. This primordial relationship between the two qualities is found in many symbol systems. Here's the Kabbalistic version, a quote from D. Fortune in the Mystical Kabbalah. This clearly indicates the function of polarity that prevails between the planes of form and the planes of force. The planes of form being the female aspect, polarized and made fertile by the influences of the planes of force. The Hermetic tradition describes it this way, and a quote from the Kabbalion. There is this dual aspect in the mind of every person. The I, or self, represents the masculine principle of mental gender. The me, ego, represents the female principle. In the contracting of a marriage between heaven and earth, uniting the polarities within the divided psyche, the ego must learn, usually through great suffering, that its correct role is a magnetic one in relation to that of the self. The work cannot progress until this lesson has been learned and accepted completely. As long as the ego insists on taking dynamic initiative as usual in the illusory world of appearances, the results can only be the kind of objective world we inhabit, one of chaos and strife. The lesson of this hexagram, then, is the realization that the only correct source of power lies within the self, and that the ego must yield to that source as a bride to her bridegroom. Unfortunately, the contemporary relationship between the sexes has become so confused that this metaphor is seldom effective in conveying the profound truth it represents. The self, the causal body of theosophy, dwells beyond the restrictions of space-time and is preeminently suited for directing the work. since it can see ahead, so to speak, and it knows the effects of all the available choices. The ego, on the other hand, dwells in space-time and is able to take action. By its choices, it makes or breaks the work. The ideal reciprocity between ego and self is a simple and logical division of labor. The self can see ahead but cannot take direct action, and the ego can take direct action but cannot see ahead. For the ego to act without direction from the self is to grope blindly in the dark, and the work clearly cannot progress under such circumstances. The superior man therefore clears his mind and remains receptive to the will of the self. Obviously, it takes time to learn how to do this properly. In its initial stages, that's what the work is all about. Another quote from the Kabbalion. The majority of people are more or less the slaves of heredity, environment, etc., and manifest very little freedom. They are swayed by the opinions, customs, and thoughts of the outside world, and also by their emotions, feelings, moods, etc. They manifest no mastery worthy of the name. The second and third sentences in the Confucian commentary elicit the sexual symbolism in this hexagram quite clearly. The female trigram is above and the male trigram is below. Their two influences move, respond, and unite with each other. The male is placed below the female. His repression is her satisfaction and brings fulfillment. Blofeld comments on this in a footnote. I doubt if this should be regarded as shedding light upon the ancient Chinese concept of the most acceptable position for intercourse. It is more likely to mean that the girl is able to depend upon the man as a plant depends upon the earth for its nourishment. Symbolism works on many levels, and Blofeld's aborted insight does apply to some of them. It is an established fact that the sentences in question accurately describe tantric sexual techniques practiced in the Orient for millennia. To understand the principles of the work, we must be able to see the obvious as symbolic of an abstraction and vice versa. Sexual polarity is a very tricky and volatile symbol because we are predisposed to confine it to its most literal meaning. The hardest part of symbolic interpretation is to know where in the continuum a specific symbol belongs in any given situation. Without changing lines, this hexagram suggests that you examine your impulses and motivations to act and see if they are truly in accordance with the goals of the work. The figure can sometimes take on the meaning of importuning, to press or urge with frequent or unreasonable requests or troublesome persistence. In other words, you might be importuning the oracle for answers which it is of no mind to give you. It is also significant to note that every line has a more or less negative connotation. These are all very strong warnings to the ego to control its compulsive need to take the initiative, to influence the situation. Calm down. Reality is not what it appears to be. Please allow the self to direct the work. Suggestions for meditation. Compare the concepts in this hexagram with hexagram number 54, propriety, number 53, gradual progress, and number 11, harmony. How do they all deal with the symbol of marriage as an aspect of the work? Compare the first three lines with hexagram number 52, keeping still. Initiative is the first hexagram of part 2 of the I-ming. Why do you suppose the book was divided into 2 unequal sections? Why did the division appear between the 30th and 31st hexagrams? An even division would be between the 32nd and 33rd. A quote from Feng Yu Lan in A Short History of Chinese Philosophy. The I-ming was originally divided into 2 books, considers the first of these as dealing with the world of nature and the second as dealing with that of man. What insights does the alchemical concept of the unus mundus bring to bear on these questions? And now to read about our supporting hexagram, following, number 17. He calls following, which other titles could be according with, acquiring followers, adapting, adjusting, to accord with, to accompany, concordance, conformance to the work. A quote from D.F. Hook, learn to serve in order to rule. Quit the old ways. In the Judgment, we have a quote from Blofeld, following sublime success. Righteous persistence brings reward, no error. This sublime success comes, of course, only to those who follow what is right, namely the will of heaven, or of those whose own will embodies it. This again puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, what the primary hexagram means for us. And quote from Ritzimo/Carter, following spring growing harvesting trial without fault. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of being impelled or drawn into moving forward. It emphasizes that yielding to the impulse by accepting guidance is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to follow. The image, a quote from Blofeld, this hexagram symbolizes thunder rumbling within a swamp. When darkness falls, the superior man goes within and rests peacefully. The component trigrams can be read as thunder and marsh, but also as movement and joy. In the Book of Change, joy is frequently associated with willing obedience to and glad acceptance of what is right. Commentary, Confucius/Leg, in following the dynamic trigram places itself under the magnetic. We see in them the attributes of movement and pleasure. Through firm correctness, all under heaven will be found following at such a time. Leg, following comes after enthusiasm, the symbol of harmony and satisfaction. When these conditions prevail, men are sure to follow. The hexagram includes the ideas of both following others and being followed by others. The good auspice is due to this flexibility, but in either instance, the following must be guided by a reference to what is correct. The lower trigram of movement represents the eldest son, and the upper trigram of pleasure represents the youngest daughter. The strong places itself under the weak, esteeming others higher than himself and giving the idea of following. The union of movement with pleasure suggests the same idea. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Following means advancement through willpower. The superior man rests on his inner virtue. In following, the trigram of movement follows the trigram of cheerfulness. Independent action subordinates itself and allows itself to be led by cheerful obedience. In terms of the work, this symbolizes our willingness to follow or adhere to its principles. Psychologically interpreted, following means the compliant subordination of ego autonomy to the great work of psychic integration. Blofeld points out that the trigram of joy or cheerfulness is often associated with willing obedience to and glad acceptance of what is right, hence the cheerful following of the intent of the self. He explains the role of the superior man in the image as it is not hard to see the connection between following and resting peacefully, for once we have given our allegiance to others, or the self, we no longer have to worry about what should be done. A quote from Feng Yulan in A Short History of Chinese Philosophy. At 70, Confucius allowed his mind to follow whatever it desired, yet everything he did was naturally right of itself. His actions no longer needed a conscious guide. He was acting without effort. This represents the last stage in the development of the sage. When received without changing lines, this hexagram often takes the meaning of to accord with. In such instances, the answer is an affirmation to your query. And now back to our primary hexagram to read our changing lines, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or here are some places you may find yourself. They are the most focused part of our reading, and they take precedence over all other elements. Changing line 1, Lu, stimulation in the big toe. If you get this line, you will plan on undertaking, but if it is planned hastily, it will be difficult to carry out. Cleary 1, sensing in the big toe is inauspicious. The big toe can move but not walk. To feel something one cannot carry out is not right sensing. This is sensitivity that stirs the human mentality. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Her mind is set on what is beyond herself. Blofeld. This implies that the will is fastened upon external matters. Leg. The first line is magnetic at the commencement of the figure. Although the fourth line is a proper correlate, his influence will be ineffective. However, much she moves her toes, that won't enable her to walk. What is beyond herself is represented by the fourth line. There is the desire to influence, but no strength and or ability to do so. Notes and paraphrases. Sue, at the outset, something is beginning to happen which is not yet apparent to everyone. Wing, there is something in the air. Perhaps it's the beginning of a compelling attraction or an idea just coming to light. Whatever it is of little significance, since a great deal more must be done to make it a reality. Editor, although the image is simple, the concept behind it is not. Wilhelm's commentary suggests the idea of a hidden influence, a latent force within the situation, which has not yet become apparent. This energy is focused on what is beyond itself, i.e., it wants to become manifest, but as yet is not powerful enough to do so. There is a suggestion of impatience to take action. At its most neutral, the line can mean a concern with something distant in time or space, even an abstract idea. Legg's Confucian commentary is a good paraphrase. A quote from M.E. Harding in Psychic Energy. In times of stress, physical or mental, he might astonish his friends and even himself by the undisciplined and primitive reactions that suddenly usurp the attitudes of the well-drilled persona. Such reactions do not come from the conscious part of the psyche. They arise from the non-personal part and reveal not the conscious character, but the stage of development that the non-personal psyche has reached. James Dekorne breaks down line 3 into 3 possible succinct definitions, A, B, and C. A is unseen forces work toward change, an image of a subliminal influence or latent energy. B, an image of a restless ego, a mind seething with great plans, schemes, or intentions. And C, don't cross your bridges until you come to them. And then line 3, Slofnacy, feeling his calf, thigh, holding to his follower, distress. Cleary 2, sensing in the thighs, when clinging is following, to go on brings shame. Wu, he moves his thighs and stays close to those who he follows. He will regret if he keeps going forward. Commentary, Confucius/Leg, he moves his thighs, he still doesn't want to rest in his place. His will is set on following others. What he holds in his grasp is low. Wilhelm/Baines, for he cannot keep still. When the will is directed to things that one's followers hold to, this is very base. Leg, the attempt to move the thighs is inauspicious. The dynamic third line in the dynamic place wants to run after line 4, which is said here to be the seat of the mind. He exercises his influence with an inferior purpose. What he holds in his grasp is low, is understood to refer to the magnetic first and second lines. Following leads the mind to the lines above. Low is understood in the sense of mean. Notes and paraphrases. Sue. A person should refrain from running after those he would like to influence, yielding to the whims of his master, and acquiescing to the moods of his own heart. Personal inhibition should constitute the basis for the enjoyment of granted freedom. Wing, you must gain control of yourself. Don't run this way and that on impulse in an attempt to influence others or indulge in your many whims. You will ultimately be humiliated by such unconsidered actions. Set up a few inhibitions for yourself and operate within these limitations while you develop some self-control. And then the editor. Mr. Legg, a proper Victorian, did not bring out the earthy imagery of this line to its fullest. If we were to receive this image in a dream, it might take the blatantly sexual form of the pelvic thrusting associated with male dogs. When seen in this way, the idea behind this line becomes clear. Quote from Plato, the Timaeus. Hence it is that in men the privy member is disobedient and self-willed, like a creature that will not listen to reason, and because of frenzied appetite bent upon carrying all before it. In women again, for the same reason, what is called the matrix or womb, a living creature within them with a desire for childbearing, if it be left unfruitful beyond the due season, is vexed and aggrieved, and wandering throughout the body and blocking the channels of the breath. By forbidding respiration brings the sufferer to extreme distress and causes all manner of disorders. Until at last the eros of the one and the desire of the other bring the pair together. Pluck as it were the fruit from the tree, and sow the plough land of the womb with living creatures still unformed and too small to be seen. He gives, changing line 3, two possible succinct definitions, A and B. The image suggests A. The image suggests a mindless and compulsive urge to influence the situation. And B, you allow yourself to be influenced by base emotions. Now we will turn to Hilary Barrett's commentary and then wrap it up. She calls Hexagram 31 influence. Key questions. What influence is active and what does it draw you towards? What is its place in your life? Oracle. Influence. Creating success. Constancy bears fruit. Taking a woman. Good fortune. Influence is what moves people and how people are open and available to be moved. By emotion or inspiration, physical responses, or visiting spirits. All these influences touch, stir, and attract us, drawing us into relationship. The Chinese character for influence shows a mouth and a weapon. The influence goes deep and makes us vulnerable. It is good to respond to the power of influence with constancy, steadying the motion it inspires and creating a place in your life to contain it. The man who takes a woman in marriage brings her into his home and makes room for her there. Good fortune comes from this more feminine way of relating, being open and allowing space for new influences. Image. Above the mountain is a lake, influence. A noble one accepts people with emptiness. The lake can form because the mountain makes space for it, yet still remains inwardly solid. With solid rock on the inside, there can be clear water above. Without it, there would only be mud throughout. In the same way, the noble one accepts people into an empty space. He ensures that he can hear and receive others without confusing his self with theirs. Sequence. The I Ching is divided into two canons. The upper canon ends with hexagram 30, clarity, and the lower canon begins here. Influence follows from all the hexagrams that precede it. There is heaven and earth, and so there are the 10,000 things. There are the 10,000 things, and so there is man and woman. There is man and woman, and so there is husband and wife. There is husband and wife, and so there is father and son. There is father and son, and so there is ruler and minister. There is ruler and minister, and so there is higher and lower. There is higher and lower, and so there is a place for rights and justice to operate. This is a creation story for the human world. How it arises from relationships, beginning with the first two hexagrams and culminating in harmonious ways to relate to people and to the spirits. It sets attraction and influence in context, showing how people belong together and complement one another. Pair. Influence forms a pair with hexagram 32, lasting. Influence calls, lasting endures. Influence is a time to be called and moved. It is always an encounter with something new. And then our supporting hexagram 17, she calls following as well. And this puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, how it means, what it means to us. Key questions. How are things flowing and how can you move with them? Where are you being nudged and guided? Oracle. Following from the source. Creating success, constancy bears fruit, no mistake. Energy flows strongly into life's landscapes, bringing a great creative drive from the source through towards fulfillment. Following it means a willingness to honor the flow and align actions with it. You can know your ideal and then allow it to meld with the natural current, following signs and nudges and allowing them to draw you onward. Then you may experience following as an effortless flow of supportive synchronicities, or you may experience it as events unfolding in accordance with their own schedule and failing to keep to yours. It can seem as if simply allowing yourself to be guided by the current is not enough, and you ought to be doing something. But moving with the creative process is not a mistake. Image. At the center of the lake is thunder, following. A noble one at nightfall goes inside for renewal and rest. In spring, the dragon flies out over the fields and brings rain, but over winter he sleeps at the bottom of the lake. As the dragon and the noble one know, energy is stored up below the level of conscious activity, and so to connect with it, you need to go inside and sleep. Instead of obsessively pursuing your desires, stop and rest in accordance with the season. Sequence. Following comes from Hexagram 16, enthusiasm. Enthusiasm naturally means following. When you have a great vision, things and people are naturally carried along by it. And it could be that what first visited you as inspiration corresponds with a larger, more fundamental energy that you experience now as an inner momentum to events. Pair. Following is paired and contrasted with Hexagram 18, corruption. Following has no causes, corruption, and then order. Following, you live in the present. Events are not experienced as the effects of causes, they arise spontaneously in the moment. But corruption marks a time for investigating the causes of negative effects, setting life on a more solid foundation. And we will go back to Hexagram 31 and read our changing lines, which put a pin in the map saying you are here, or here are some places you may find yourself. Most specific part of our reading that takes precedence over all other elements. Changing line 1. In Hexagram 31, influence. Influence in your big toes. Influence first enters your awareness as a stirring realization that you could be somewhere else. Something is pulling you, and with no clear ideas yet of what it might be, you only know that you have itchy feet. This is not yet good or bad. Nothing has happened yet. You are still standing where you were before, but everything could happen. Those small toes can set the whole body in motion. Even the very beginnings of influence open up the structure of your commitments and relationships for far-reaching transformation. And then changing line 3, influence in your thighs, holding on to your following, going on, shame. You're moved to run swiftly and strongly after your object of desire. You fixate on it and pursue it reflexively, one step following the next faster than thought. Wholly invested in the pursuit, you fail to see the better possibilities around you. Your desire distracts you from what you truly want. An essential first step is to get a grip on this following, to recognize that this pattern is not good for you, and you need to bring it under control. However, recognition alone is not enough. Going on in the same direction, just in a more conscious and controlled way, is shameful. You need a new destination. As I said, this is a two-part, so head on over to Helen's, sorry, I was just reading from Hilary Barrett, Helen from Eye of the Serpent Tarot's reading that will be linked in the description box below to see how we can deal with these energies and where we might take them. She'll do a pick a card, 3 or possibly 4 different options that you can choose from that might help direct you in following the will of the self versus the will of the ego, possibly something along those lines. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, stopping by, and you're welcome anytime. Thank you.